Brian Terr, welcome to the Consumer Credit Matters podcast. How are you?
Well, and yourself?
I'm doing great, thanks. Great to
Good.
get it on with you finally. I know we've had a couple of conversations before now, and I'm excited to bring your perspective to my audience just because you are working in the automotive industry, and in particular, you're the head of inventory at JD Powers, a very prominent name. You're an entrepreneur for decades now who has had focus on inventory tracking, and hear really from you what motivated you to get into this aspect
Sure.
of the industry, what problem you were solving 20 or so years ago when you started, where the or how the industry of inventory tracking has navigated some choppy waters over that intervening time, and kind of where we plan to be in the future as this technology evolves, as it is, as
Sure.
we'll get into. So, Brian, if we can, with that as kind of context, if you could just maybe introduce yourself and
Sure.
talk a little bit about what it was that motivated you to begin this entrepreneurial journey. Yeah.
So anybody who was to look at my LinkedIn would know that I spent, roughly 15 years at Edmunds.com running strategy and business development and saw an opportunity in the marketplace. And so in 2016, I left, um, built a company called Inventory Command Center. Um, 5 years later, JD Power came knocking and said, listen, we see what you're doing. We'd love to have you a part of our team, and acquired us. As you're right, well, JD Power does certainly a lot more than just sort of the consumer surveys. They are one of the leaders in the space with respect to data and insights and understanding of what's happening in the market. From my perspective, I've got just sort of a unique insight, separate and aside from how they view the world. Is I see tens of thousands of dealers worth of data coming into my platform multiple times a day on a daily basis. So I'm seeing what I call the ins and the outs. And as a result, I've got a very good understanding of turn and market conditions that are taking place. And in fact, my platform was initially built for the retail side, meaning that I help clients like Amazon Autos, Cars.com, um, many of the banks, TD Bank, to present inventory to consumers to help them on the origination side. But I also have clients who are in the financial world who want to have a better understanding of how vehicles are moving, and how the velocity of vehicles are in the marketplace, and I see all that as well.
Right. So on the retail side, you're talking about these sites that, oh, I want to have a specific make and model, year, what have you, type vehicle,
Yep.
and somebody needs to track where those might be.
Yes, that's
And so
correct.
that's essentially what your software is doing on the retail side. And I guess
Correct.
it ultimately got the attention of some of the wholesalers or banks, finance companies, who found or recognized
Correct.
a use for tracking inventory for financing purposes. And this is really all, but I mean, this is where it intersects with, certainly the Consumer Credit Matters audience, is that, we're interested in understanding how the industry is tracking, in this case, ownership, which changes hands often from
Yes.
even a new car, right? From the manufacturer to their finance company to the dealership themselves, and then ultimately to the retail, to the consumer, right? It's something that most people really don't think about. We drive past dealerships all the time when they're driving down the highway or through town, and there's dozens and dozens of vehicles on the lot. All those vehicles sitting there have to be financed, and usually
Yeah.
the dealership has some kind of arrangement with a bank or array of banks, or their captive finance company of the OEM for the vehicles that they're selling,
Sure.
and
Yep.
it creates an operational a need to track that operational aspect of your business so that the right
Absolutely.
people are paying the right counterparties are being paid, and they're being paid on time. And again, when you're talking about very expensive pieces of inventory, vehicles themselves, the you know the tracking of this is all the more important.
Being able to accurately not just know where that vehicle is or who owns that vehicle at the time, but also the the year, the make, the model, the trim, the body style, the drivetrain, the standard equipment, but more importantly, the optional equipment, right? When you think about LTVs, right?
Hmm.
Loan to value ratios that are used as part of, the sales process for retail. I mean, knowing exactly what is on that vehicle becomes quite important.
And you said that this is information that can be gleaned from the VIN, the vehicle identification number itself.
S
So,
s Some of it can. Some of
yeah,
it
some of it.
you need to actually know how that vehicle was built, originally. What did it roll off the line with, right? And that's again part of the reason why JD Power and us got together was because they have certain manufacturer data. We had the ability to ingest data from all different sources. You could marry that up and have a very accurate representation of what was happening in the industry.
I'm familiar as a retailer looking up, for example, the value of a vehicle in the so-called Kelly Blue Book, right? Where
Sure,
you can
long time
you
ago.
can
Yeah.
right, where you can see
Yeah.
the make, the model, the trim. You could get close maybe to the trim that you wanted or the trim of the car that you were looking at, and then but what you're talking about is there's a term of art for it. I forgot.
Power booking?
Power booking. That's what I'm.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Yes,
sorry,
we
power
were
book.
just talking. So power booking is a I get the term of art for basically describing the vehicle in better trim
Well,
terms than it has. And
it
this
actually
is
is, yeah.
right, right. So
I
yeah,
I don't wanna mischaracterize it. This is not an all the time thing, but it does impact those folks who may, the financial institutions that may be lending money on a unit that may not be accurately represented,
give a
right?
good example of a
Sure,
power booking if you don't
sure.
mind.
You know, is a bank willing to lend more money if a vehicle is worth more? The answer is sure, because their collateral is worth more if something should happen and they need to take back the vehicle. Um, so it's possible that somebody says, "Hey," or just doesn't understand the trim of the vehicle, right? Let's just say it's a benign kind of scenario where they own a vehicle and they believe that the trim is the highest level trim, which has certain packages on it, or the engine is a certain way, but it's not. And as a result, that vehicle has been, theoretically power booked, where you're contending that it is worth more than it actually is. Sure, there could be cases that are nefarious, where somebody says, "Listen, it's got a sunroof," and it actually doesn't,
Right,
which is a
right.
$3,000 option. But but even under, really basic conditions, it's possible that somebody just doesn't understand the vehicle that they have.
Right. So in a way, what you're saying is in kind of structured finance terms, you're in the LTV, the loan to value ratio. You're juicing up the V so you can
Yes,
so you can obtain a bigger L. Right. You can
correct,
finance more, but very importantly, from a collections or a repo perspective, when you go to uh, when you get your hands on the vehicle because things haven't gone right, that V isn't what you thought it was, and so
correct,
you're gonna take a much bigger loss, all
correct.
things being equal, on that vehicle. So this
Yep,
is an important risk factor to be aware, particularly I imagine in the used vehicle
very
market, right?
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
new vehicles are a little different, but could still happen theoretically. So, but that again, this all makes its way back to not just, not just it has many downstream impacts. And what I mean by that is it makes its way, to the ABS market too, for those folks who are holding these assets on either balance sheet, or, within their instruments, within an ABS itself, within the structured debt. Think about how much collateral must be underpinning an ABS, and, you know, the mistakes that may or may not be there. And I think, you alluded to it earlier, the tricolor stuff and some of the other things that have taken place in the ABS world. Um, it all comes down to better understanding the inventory, where it is and who owns it.
Give me a sense of how the industry uses this software today. And
Sure. So inventory is very messy, right? And it
yeah,
comes from a variety of different places and disparate data sets that need to be brought together to create those comprehensive records. And that's really what my platform does. So it's allowing me to see with what I'll call near real time the state of the industry from an inventory perspective. Where is that inventory? What's happening with that inventory? What's the velocity of that inventory? How accurate is that inventory? So if you're a bank perspective and you're looking at your portfolio and you want to understand, the accuracy of it, we can help with that. If you want it, if you're lending money on it and you want to know, is a vehicle still at a dealership, you could look at the data that we have and say, okay, I'm still seeing it as in stock, right?
Hmm.
Or it's not in stock, it's been sold. Or um, if you're on the buy side of the financial world and you want to understand how a retailer is doing or how an OEM is doing based on the velocity of inventory, we can look at that as well.
So you have, okay, let's just make it a simple example here where you have one bank offering, say, floor plan lending to
Yep.
one dealership.
The inventory first gets brought in, right? And when they go to merchandise it, they'll connect it to their IMS, right? Which is their inventory management system, which is a primary place where I'm pulling data from. And when a vehicle gets sold, they take it out or they mark it as sold. And then I see that vehicle no longer available in those systems, and I can take it down as well. So when I'm representing that inventory or presenting that inventory to a bank, they're going to see that that vehicle is no longer available for sale.
And your software sits in between, say, the dealership and the finance company. I'm just
Correct. Yep.
that
That's
it's
exactly
sitting in
correct.
between. So
Yeah.
it is doing what then? It is translating, it's normalizing, it's
It's ingesting the data,
mhm,
say, "This is what's available now," right?
okay.
It's saying, this vehicle has been this is the accuracy or this is how that vehicle is being represented," meaning the VIN, the year, the make, the model, the trim, the body style, the drivetrain, the options, the optional equipment. I keep coming back to optional equipment because it's super important with respect to the price of a vehicle, the
Sure.
value of a vehicle.
Right, right.
And then, I see when that vehicle gets taken out or when it's no longer available, when it's been
But your system isn't validating the V. You're taking that as a given from the dealership?
well, I can validate
You
the
can.
V. I
Okay.
can, which
Using what? The VIN or
not just the VIN, but, in some cases, certainly on the new side and some on the used side too, which is this is the value of JD Power, which is to say JD Power has access to reams and reams and reams, heaps of data that they get from a variety of sources, some of them the manufacturer, about when that vehicle rolled off the assembly line. There's a concept of a Monroney label, which is a legal representation of that vehicle. The window sticker, right?
Yep,
When you
yep.
walk onto a lot and you see a new car, there's a window sticker that says, here's all the things on that vehicle. That data can live in perpetuity. Even though that vehicle gets sold, or even though that vehicle may
Mhm.
come back into the market years later after it was a lease, that data in many cases is still available. And I can see as a part of JD Power that data and what that vehicle was when it rolled off the line. Is it possible that somebody changes the wheels? Is it possible that somebody adds optional equipment even beyond what was on the vehicle when it left the factory? Sure, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but knowing how that vehicle left the factory when it's new and even when it's used is a big help to anybody who's financing that vehicle at any stage.
So you are, and then what your software is doing in part is, at least for the validation part of it, is kind of helping bring in metadata to triangulate around as close to the truth as you can get.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Spot on. Spot
Okay.
on.
Perfect. So then that obviously it benefits both the dealership and the finance company, so that
Correct.
you're speaking a common language with a common understanding, and you have a kind of an arbiter of truth, which is what your software is doing.
Correct.
Is it serving as a some kind of legal repository, legal record?
No,
No.
no, no.
Okay.
That's between, ultimately the dealer and the finance company or the finance company, on either side of that equation.
Got it.
All this data is messy and dirty and has to be sort of normalized in such a way and put together in such a way that it can be understood by all the parties, not just the dealer.
One of the challenges I can imagine when you're trying to marry different software platforms to one another, which is initially what you need to do, that is probably one of the biggest hurdles, is it not?
Starting
Yeah,
from the very beginning as an entrepreneur, it's you start from 0 integrations, right? You build up
right,
to, 400 integrations, and then you have to everybody does it differently. Every file
right.
structure is different, every integration's different, but you have to be able to provide one single feed on the export that's taken all those disparate feeds into consideration and the way that the data may be represented differently. Think about just from a color of a vehicle perspective, how many different ways there is to say the color blue, right? Midnight blue, pearl blue, ocean blue, sky blue, right? But they may even have colors that are, just brands, right?
Mm,
Arctic. What does that mean? It's funny, if you don't mind, I'd
yeah,
like to sort of jump into a little bit of the, the future of where this is going a little bit,
yes,
as it relates to, everybody talks about AI, right? And
yeah.
the future and AI and
I haven't
AI
had a
this,
podcast that didn't mention AI in a long time.
yeah, AI this, AI that. I think the challenge with AI is AI is only as good as the data that it's got available to use,
Hmm.
right? An LLM is pulling in information, and any random LLM, it's very hard for it to truly understand. It may be able to do a what I'm gonna call a basic VIN code. What's the year, the make, and the model, right? But beyond that, it can't, with complete accuracy, do what, say, systems like ours or JD Power is able to do, which is to determine the exact trim and the
Hmm.
exact options on a vehicle. The only way to do that is to have the exact data from the original source, right? From a manufacturer, um, or to be able to have collected that data over years and years and years and accurately represent that vehicle in a way that, a traditional sort of large language model may get close, but not exact. So anybody who's relying strictly on AI to accurately represent a vehicle, may not be quite getting there.
Well, let me see if I can clarify that, in at least in my mind, what you've described. Um, because the JD Power information data, at least a lot of it, is proprietary, it is not out in the wild, so to speak.
Correct.
LLMs can't take advantage of that, and then therefore it can't get to the same level of precision that the JD Power based software can get to.
Correct.
Do I have that right so
You're
far?
exactly right.
You're saying AI will have a limited role, at least, insofar as producing any
Eh,
better or even as good a result as a proprietary database, because again,
correct.
it's the accuracy or the precision of the vehicle tracking is based on proprietary information
That's
that
exactly
is
correct.
just,
A
the LLMs don't have access to that,
That's
full
exactly
stop.
right. Yeah.
I mean, I've spoken to so many people from various aspects of, call it the consumer finance sector, where AI is looming as this uh, transformative force, and people are concerned about it. And what you're describing is not that. So you might be the first person I've spoken to that isn't
I don't I don't wanna
particularly concerned about it.
I don't wanna stand here and tell you that it's not concerning, right? It
Yeah.
is, right?
Mm.
Does the data get out into the wild, to your earlier comment? I is AI transforming the automotive space? Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. I don't want to
Just not this aspect of it,
I
at least
think
not yet.
right, exactly. To accurately represent a vehicle, you need to understand what that vehicle exactly is, and close enough is not good enough.
Yeah.
Accurately is the only way to know precisely.
Brian, maybe we shift. What might be instructive here too, in terms of illustrating the value add of the software, the inventory tracking, is if you have any war stories or any areas where either there was call it a ugly situation that you were able to come in and ameliorate or rescue or turn around, or
Oh,
anything like that come to mind?
there was an event that occurred maybe I can't was it a year back, maybe a little bit more than a year back, where
Oh,
one of the
recent.
large it was yeah CDK
Hmm.
and not to again pour salt on that wound, but there were times where CDK, who's the large DMS provider in the industry, um, representing almost 40%, 50% of franchise dealers from a DMS perspective.
Got it.
Um, that system had a nationwide challenge and went down. Um, there are a lot of people that become dependent upon the flow of that data. As a result, we ended up um, being sought by a lot of folks in the industry during that period of time, which lasted almost a month. So it was one of those situations where the market could have really gone down, um, but people were able to turn to us and say, "Hey, we know you also have this data. Can you help us stay up?" Right, and that was an industry wide issue, where
So
we were able to come in and support clients who needed that data and have it sort of available to them.
that's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good outcome.
yeah.
Good story.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm as an entrepreneur, well, I'm constantly thinking about, what else is out there, what's there. I'm still very much with JD Power. I don't want to misrepresent. And they're a great company, and they've been great to me. But as an entrepreneur, you're constantly thinking about different things that may be available.
Hmm.
How to help the industry. Having been in it for nearly 30 years, how do you help them? And some of the stuff that JD Power is just again like Edmunds is not interested in. I love the ABS side of the business, right?
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
the how do you help people who own existing portfolios of underlying collateral better understand where they're at, right? Those are things that just get me excited beyond inventory. And as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about those things. So maybe one day you'll invite me back and I'll talk about some of those things
Yeah, I
if I
mean,
could.
that's a great intersection too. And like I said, kind of a nice way to bookend the conversation that, we were all of us following the structured finance ABS sector were kind of brought to the table around this tricolor alleged fraud situation, and that was front and center to that situation was inventory management.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Brian, I really appreciate you taking the
yeah.
time to explain what it is you have brought to the industry, and still, still bring to the industry through JD Power. So
Yeah,
thank you,
well,
Brian.
it goes without saying, and I appreciate you having me on. But if anybody, you or anybody in your audience has questions, they can certainly reach out to me via LinkedIn. I'm available and happy to chat with truly everybody. Maybe I've opened myself up for millions of calls, Will,
We'll
based on
see.
your podcast. But
I could only
please
hope
don't.
so. But thank you again, Brian, and
You're
thank you,
welcome.
listeners. Appreciate
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
my
Take care.
pleasure.